So there is in this a little implicitly some ideas about what consciousness is. I mean, you in the end of faith, you don't take a clear position on the mind-body problem, but you acknowledge at least its difficulty more than some people who call themselves atheists acknowledge. I mean, there's a tendency for atheists to be materialists in a particularly simple-minded way, and to think that, you know, we figured out why there is subjective experience, and don't you get it? It's just the brain, and I think a lot of times they really haven't thought about it as much as they might. Now, do you have a position on the mind-body problem, or are you just sure it's a problem?
Well, I'm sure it's a problem, yeah, and I'm sure I don't know the answer to it, and I'm reasonably sure all of these people who think they know the answer to it also don't know the answer to it. I mean, I'm close enough to the literature in philosophy and neuroscience.
You won't mention names.
No.
But feel free to.
Yes,
I'll bet some of them have been on Meaning of Life TV.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I think so I am somewhat agnostic on this, and actually maybe even agnostic in the true sense, in the sense that, you know, I doubt that we're equipped to know ultimately. I think I guess Colin McGinn has really argued for this idea that we just probably are not in a position to resolve this mystery. We may be, but I can't see how. I mean, let's say it is true that consciousness emerges purely out of information processing and in our case, neuronal complexity. You know, you wire together a sufficient number of neurons in the right way, and what was completely unconscious, what had no interior dimension, suddenly lights up, and there's, you know, all of a sudden something that it's like to be that brain. Maybe that's true. You know, let's just stipulate that is in fact a fact. You know, that still seems to me to be the mere declaration of a miracle. I don't understand how that is intelligible to us in the way, and there's many false analogies come rushing in here, like an analogy with heat and and brittleness.
I agree, they're all false.
Yeah.
And it's also not clear why it would be functionally necessary for that to creep into the brain. But this is an argument I've had with Dean Dennett, and it's ultimately, the more you talk about it, the clearer it doesn't get. I mean, consciousness is one of those issues on which people who disagree will disagree forever. Now, you say at one point in the End of Faith, in terms of talking about spirituality and mysticism, there's clearly a sacred dimension to our existence, and coming to terms with it could well be the highest purpose of human life. Now, when religious people think of purpose to human life, they think of something that a God imbued life with. And more generally, when people use the word at all, pretty much they often think of an imbuer. In other words, if a biologist says, well, the purpose of organisms is to get their genes into the next generation, they actually have in mind a process, natural selection, that quote, designed organisms with that goal embedded. Now, when you say this could well be the highest purpose of human life, what does that mean to a self-described atheist?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm using purpose with a capital P in that sense, that it has some kind of teleological implication, or that it need extend beyond this life. But when, you know, we're all trying to live as well as we can, and that the estimation of whether we're succeeding, it has to be measured against some sense of what constitutes a good life. You know, what is the good life? And I think the good life is very clearly becoming as happy and loving and as free of fear as you possibly can, and helping to create a world where people become likewise. I mean, we want well-being, whether we know it or not. We want to feel good, and I don't mean in a trivial sense. I mean, we just want to see. We want the walls of our neurotic self-preoccupation and our all of these constraints upon our feeling well in any given moment. We want those constraints to come down, and so the question is how to bring them down, and what are the psychological and social consequences of them coming down. And I mean, you spoke about self-interest as though it were a counterpoint to mysticism or spirituality, but I think self-interest can also just be reconceived. You know, it's possible to realize that it is in your self-interest to be selfless certainly in certain moments. I mean, that self-interest is, you know, your greatest step toward personal happiness could require some heroic self-sacrifice, you know, and you wouldn't be able to live with yourself if you didn't make that self-sacrifice.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think the Buddhists are right that they didn't know about natural selection, but the way it does its work, the way it sets our motivational compass is, it makes happiness this intrinsically, this kind of vanishing thing. It's the bait that keeps disappearing. So we pursue it, but it doesn't last by nature. And right. you identify spirituality with quote, a happiness that survives frustration of conventional desires. Right. And that's what you have in mind. You're saying that may intrinsically involve a moral life, more moral than we kind of naturally, instinctively pursue.
Yeah.
That would be nice. I would like to think that's true.